Okay, so hello and welcome, guys, and welcome to yet another session of the audit. And yes, audit is 50 marks syllabus in your subject, paper number 12B, and we have discussed an important element of paper number 12B yesterday. Yesterday we had started with our topic, chapter number 7, which is miscellaneous audit, guys. And today we are at the part 2 of this miscellaneous audit. Guys, just to reiterate, just to tell you why did I take this chapter first of all, why is this chapter so relevant and so important. If you see this chart, then this chapter actually holds a good weightage of marks in your examination, and for past few attempts specifically, this chapter has been commanding a weightage of 12 to 16 marks, which is huge. Out of 50 marks, approximately 25% is dedicated to this particular chapter. And yes, this trend, according to me, should continue, and this chapter will definitely remain one of the most important chapters after chapter number 4, which is company audit. Definitely the second most important chapter is chapter number 4, but the first most important chapter is miscellaneous audit and its constituents, which are appearing in the examination again and again. And guys, you really need to keenly and very precisely complete this chapter, and from the notes or study material wherever you are studying, you have to do this very precisely. So yes, let's start part 2 of the chapter miscellaneous audit. Before starting the part 2, my question to all of you would be, what do you mean by miscellaneous audit? Why are we studying this chapter called miscellaneous audit? What is the relevance of this word miscellaneous? I told you yesterday itself that audit is a big procedure, and it's a detailed process. And miscellaneous means that any small part of audit, we'll be discussing some subsets of audit, some subparts of audit, and those parts of audit will be known as miscellaneous audit. So we won't be studying any law, we'll more be focusing on logics at this point in time. And I've already told you that audit is definitely not law driven. Its procedures are law driven, but the entire audit is not law driven. The audit is driven by logics. So yes, in this chapter, the institute has made sure that they introduce you to various small aspects of audit, various bits of audit, so that you are well versed with the specific technicalities of each kind of audit. So for example, if you are auditing a hospital, what important points do you keep in mind while auditing a hospital? So suppose you are auditing an educational institution, you are auditing a college or a school, then which points should be kept in your mind to audit that particular school or college? So this chapter includes all those various small elements of audit, which are not the main audit. They are not the entire gamut of what audit does, but they represent the subsets or small parts of audit. So this chapter is miscellaneous audit. So yesterday we had done two types of miscellaneous audits, guys: branch audit and joint audit. I hope you have understood those two sections which we did yesterday. Today we are going to start audit of certain specific sections. So guys, you must have studied in your financial statements. Your financial statements contain an element called stock or inventory. So my question to you would be, where do you find the element of stock or the element of inventory in your financial statements? And I'm talking about the balance sheet. Where do you find the inventory or the stock in your balance sheet? Asset side or the liability side? Where do you find it? I'm waiting for the answers in your chat box. Your chat box, you should write where asset side or liability side contains inventory or stock. Perfect. The asset side contains a very important asset. That asset is known as inventory or the closing stock. And guys, if the closing stock is more or if it is less, then would it impact our profits also? I want answer in yes or no. So if the closing stock is more or closing stock is less, would it impact our profit also? I want answer in yes or no in the chat box. Perfect. That means stock is one such thing which not only impacts our assets, but also impacts our profits. So in the profit and loss account, in the credit side, we find this particular ingredient called the closing stock. So I'll ask you a simple question. If the businessman wants to increase its profit, if it wants to window dress its accounts, and it wants to show that, oh, I have got a huge profit, then can he increase the closing stock to increase the profit? Can he increase the closing stock? Yes, sir. If he is able to increase the closing stock, then his profit will increase. So this is a very critical element of our financial statements, which is inventory, which is closing stock, because increase of inventory will have dual effect. What is the dual effect? Number one, our assets will be inflated. Number two, our profits will be inflated. So we have to very, very categorically audit this particular section of the financial statement, which is inventory. So we are today going to start the audit of inventory or audit of stock. So guys, if you can see the picture on the screen, the picture represents inventory of a particular organization. And yes, this is how the warehouse of a particular organization looks like. So that's you in the middle of the warehouse. This is a warehouse of a multinational company. That's you in the middle of the warehouse. And all these elements are the inventory of that organization. All these boxes, the boxes which you can see, all these boxes contains the inventory or contains the finished goods, raw material, and work in progress of this particular organization. So these inventories are stacked in racks. Now this is you. This is the auditor of the company. That's you. That's the auditor. And guys, the paper which is in hands of the auditor, this contains the list of inventory or the value of inventory which the books of accounts has. So the first starting point of inventory is that let's check what is the inventory value in the books of accounts. So books of accounts will tell you, okay, we have 50 pieces of our finished goods. So 50 multiplied by the value of finished good is the closing stock. So 50 pieces of finished goods. So this round, this particular thing which is there in your hand, which you can see, which I am circling right now, is the list of inventory that has been given to you by the management of the company, by the client, that okay, this is the amount of stock which we have. Now with this list, you have come to the warehouse, and you've come to the warehouse to check whether the amount, the quantity of inventory is there or not in the warehouse. So this is how this is placed. Yes, absolutely, physical verification. Devi, you are absolutely right. This is known as physical verification of inventory. So this is the background with which I will start this topic called valuation of inventories, audit of valuation of inventories. So let's see. So first thing that you will do. So guys, again, keep law aside, keep regulations aside, keep rules aside, just apply logic. This is pure logic. First thing that you are going to see is the records of inventory. And where are you going to see the records of inventory? You are going to see the records of inventory in the books of accounts. The books which are there, the financial books, you are going to see inventory over there. Okay, so please don't think that my handwriting is really bad, but this pad is not allowing me to write properly. So that's why the handwriting is bad. Okay, so first of all, you will check the records of inventory, that in the books of accounts, what kind of inventory is there, whether 50 units of finished goods are there, or 40 units of finished goods are there, or 30 units of finished goods are there. So first point of auditing the inventory is check what is given in your books of accounts. Now guys, what happens is sometimes your books are disclosing 50 units of inventory, finished 50 units of finished goods, but when you actually go to the go down and check, there are lying only 40 units of finished goods, which means that 10 units of finished goods have been leaked, has been someone has stolen them. There are situations of theft, there are situations of people, employees stealing the inventory. So in that case, you have to be particularly vigilant that first of all, you need to see what are the status of inventory in the books of accounts, that is the record. Then you need to go to the warehouse to see whether this quantity is available in the warehouse or not. Then ensure management has done physical verification of inventory. So management has to do physical verification of inventory, and yes, you also have to be present over there. So auditor is required to be present when physical verification of inventory is taking place. Otherwise, how would the auditor know whether the godown has 50 units of finished goods or whether it has 5 units of finished goods? How would the auditor know? So auditor should be present personally, physically at the godown to check whether the inventory which is stated by the management is complete or not. Then take confirmation from suppliers about deliveries. Now, one very important element of auditing inventory is that, guys, on a sample basis means 2 or 3 items, you can check from the suppliers that have they given delivery to the company or not. So specifically in case of raw material, guys, raw material are supplied by the third parties, by the vendors. So you need to call the vendors, or you need to have a confirmation, written confirmation to the vendors. You can send it to them and you can ask them whether you have actually sent this quantity of raw material to the company. So sometimes if you are unable to attend the physical verification, then this is the way to ensure that yes, this much quantity of goods has come inside the factory premises. So take confirmation from the suppliers about delivery. You can take confirmation from the suppliers of raw material about the inventory. Then ensure these proper controls. These are proper controls for movement and issue of inventory. Now, guys, if the books of account have 50 units of finished goods, and if you go to the warehouse, there only 40 units of finished goods were found by you. That means 10 units of finished goods have been stolen from the warehouse. If 10 units have been stolen from the warehouse, then guys, it is a sure shot proof that the guard who is standing at the factory gate doesn't make inward and outward note of whatever is going out or whatever is coming in. Because guys, if that guard makes the note of inward and outward movement of inventory, then no one can steal your inventory. Because if they the guard makes a note that yes, this person has taken these many goods outside, then everyone will be afraid, because if their name is written in the register, then someone will catch hold of them. So there has to be proper control for movement of inventory. If there is no proper control for movement of inventory, then there is a possibility that the inventory is stolen, or inventory is leaked, or inventory is not properly moved. Yes, proper inspection of outward movement is definitely required. Please sir, verification result के बारे में भी video बनाइए. Okay, Vandana, that is beyond topic. Let us focus on topic first. Okay, next is check the method of valuation and disclosure in compliance with accounting standards. Now, first of all, you tell me which accounting standard deals with the inventory valuation. Which accounting standard deals with the inventory valuation? I want your answers in the chat box. Which AS deals with the method of valuation? Yes, you are absolutely right. AS2 deals with method of valuation of inventory. Now, my one more question to all of you is, please tell me what are the 3 methods which are prescribed in AS2? What are the 3 methods which are prescribed in AS2 for valuation of inventory? Next, FIFO, LIFO, weighted average. Perfect. And guys, one more information for your benefit. LIFO is a prohibited method. LIFO is no longer used in any of the industries. FIFO and weighted average are the 2 methods which are used in industries these days. LIFO method is prohibited by law, by accounting standards. So no industry uses the LIFO method. Okay, now I'll tell you a very interesting stuff. I'll tell you a practical example of how businessman plays with these methods of inventory. So guys, I went to an audit and I went to a big company, which was an Indian company, domestic company, and I went to their audit and I asked the management, okay, give me the financial statements. Guys, management gave me the financial statements, balance sheet, P&L account, everything was given to me. In the balance sheet, the figure of closing stock was blank. There was nothing in the closing stock. I asked the management, sir, where is the closing stock figure? So management replied to me that sir, closing stock figure is not finalized as yet. I said, means what? Why didn't you finalize the closing stock figure? The management told me that sir, the closing stock figure not only hits the balance sheet, but also hits the profit and loss account. And sir, if we use FIFO method versus weighted average method, there is a difference in value. So if there is a difference in value, then if we use weighted average, then the value will be something different. And if we use the FIFO method, then value will be something different, which means that if we use weighted average, then profit will be something different. If we use FIFO method, then the profit will be something different. So profits are different if we use the FIFO method versus the weighted average method. I said, perfect, you are right. That's true. This is bound to happen. But why didn't you use the methods and put the figure? Management told me, sir, we have computed the figures using both the methods. Now, the board of directors will decide which method will give them a better result. Whichever method will give them a better result, they will use that method, because AS is not saying that use only this method or that method. AS is saying use any of the two methods, FIFO or weighted average. You can use any of the two methods. So AS is giving us a liberty. Sir, it's our wish. So if we want a higher profit, then we will use the method which is disclosing a higher profit. When we will want the lower profit, then we will use the method which has a lower profit. So guys, this was the reply given to me by the management. Now my question to all of you is management correct in its approach, or is there some problem with the management's approach? What is the problem in management's approach? So I just want you to tell me whether the management approach is correct or incorrect. So you have to just write one word, correct or incorrect. So management is saying that perfect. Chahat's answer is perfect. So management is telling me it's my wish. Whenever I want, I will use FIFO method. Whenever I want, I will use weighted average method. So is management's approach correct, or is management's approach incorrect? That is my question. They are finding loopholes. Yes, Harish, they are finding loopholes. But if there are loopholes, there is no problem in exploiting those loopholes. If they are, they can be exploited. What is the problem? So yes, they are finding loopholes, but that's okay. If loophole is there in law, then what's the problem in exploiting that loophole? I will exploit that loophole. So is the management correct or incorrect? Yes, most of you have told that management is incorrect. Absolutely true, guys. Management is incorrect because the fundamental principle of auditing and accounting is that there has to be consistency. Consistency means we have to follow one principle over a period of time, again and again and again, and the method cannot be changed frequently. So what should have management done? Management should have picked up the last year's report. They should have picked up the last year financial statements, and whatever method was chosen for valuing the inventory last year, the same method should have been used this year as well. There cannot be any change in the method of inventory unless and until there is a change in law. So suppose if tomorrow the accounting standard is amended to say that, okay, I don't want FIFO method to be used, companies can only use weighted average method. If tomorrow there is a change in regulation and this change comes, then guys, the companies, the management is free to change their method. But right now, management should see what is the method being used in the last year, and the same method should be used in the current year as well. So you need to check, as an auditor, you need to check the method of valuation. What is the method of valuation and disclosure that should be in compliance with the accounting standards or the Ind AS. Next, work in progress. Now, work in progress valuation should be checked. Now, what is work in progress? Guys, work in progress are semi-finished goods, goods which are not finished completely. So if I talk about mobile phone, so mobile phone is semi-finished when it is prepared in a semi-finished manner. It is not completely prepared, and that mobile phone, some processing in that mobile phone is still left. Guys, in this case, it becomes very critical for the auditor to understand how should we value this work in progress. Because finished goods, full value is given to us. Raw material, the purchase value is given to us. But what about work in progress? How should we value work in progress? So guys, to value work in progress, we go into principles of costing, and costing tells us that you should accumulate all the expenditure which has been incurred for producing this particular product, and you should multiply the percentage of completion on this particular cost. Soon as you apply a percentage of completion on this cost, you will get the value of work in progress. Now, the biggest question that I have is, guys, can auditor verify the percentage of completion? So if I give you a half prepared mobile phone, so I tell you that, okay, the mobile phone is half prepared, it's half not prepared. Can you tell me how much percentage is prepared and how much percentage is not prepared? Can you tell me about that? Can auditor know how much percentage of a particular work in progress is completed, how much percentage is incomplete? Can an auditor tell me, can auditor tell this particular fact? Yes or no is the answer. There should be only two options, yes or no. Chahat says yes, Devi says no, Sushmita says no. Amrit says no. Arul says no. Okay. Yes. Amrit says yes. Anyone for yes? Rishiraj says yes. Nikita says no. Harish says no. Nidhi says yes. Okay. 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 So the house is mixed. Let me disclose the answer. Guys, auditor cannot tell what is the percentage of completion of any product because auditor is not qualified enough to comment on this particular aspect. Auditor doesn't know the engineering behind producing mobile phone. I don't know how our mobile phones produced. I don't know how our mobile phones constructed and how much percentage is complete. I don't know. Management is the sole authority who can know this. Auditor cannot know this. Now the question is, then auditor, how can auditor audit that particular percentage? Because the key point in valuing work in progress will be that percentage completion. How much percentage of that good is completed? So how would auditor audit that work in progress? That is the question. If he doesn't know the percentage of completion, is there any way by which auditor can verify the percentage completion? Different person appointed who is a specialist. So guys, simple. I will go to the engineering department of mobile company. I will ask the engineering head to give me in writing that how much percentage is completed. I will rely on that. If I am apprehensive about the comment which the in-house engineer will give me, I will call for an expert. I will call for an external engineer and I will ask him to tell me how much of the percentage of mobile is completed. But I myself cannot determine it. I need a certificate from a specialist. I need a certificate from an external party to verify what is the percentage of completion. So similarly, in case of food products, in case of say the gestation period of this particular product is quite high. Preparation of alcohol, guys, alcohol preparation is a long process. The wine, whiskey, beer, all these things takes a lot of time to get prepared. So auditor cannot know what is the percentage completion till 31st March. Auditor cannot know. So auditor needs a certificate from a specialist to ensure that the percentage completion is perfect, and then only can an auditor check the work in progress. So work in progress valuation should be checked by the auditor properly. Then classification of inventory should be checked by the auditor, whether raw material are kept in raw material section, finished goods are kept in finished goods section, work in progress are kept in work in progress section. So each of these elements should be properly kept, should be properly stored, and classification should be given properly to the auditor. That is an important thing. Classification of inventory should be checked properly by the auditor, and their records are to be checked. The records which are there in the classification also are to be checked. Okay. Management confirmation about stock held on behalf of others and the stock lying at other people. Okay, perfect. So this is a very important point to be checked, guys. Sometimes your stock is not kept at your premises. Sir, how can it happen? Our stock is kept at our premises only. No. Guys, sometimes like in case of FMCG products, our stock is lying in our distributor's premises. So whosoever is our distributor, we have our products lying in their premises, or we can have our products lying in our branch. We can have our products lying in our warehouse or some other third party location. Third party location is the distributor. So distributor is telling me that, okay, I will not buy the product from you. I will just call the product from you. If the product is sold, only then I will make the payment. This is the arrangement between distributor and the company. In this case, the inventory belongs to the company. The owner of inventory is the company. But who is the custodian of inventory? Who is the holder of inventory? It is the distributor. So in this case, sometimes what happens is some stock is lying at third party location of the company, and sometimes the company is holding someone else's stock. Guys, if your company's stock is being held in some other place, you as an auditor are authorized to go at that some other place, the third party location, and get your product audited. You are authorized. Yes, that location is not your client. That location is not the company of which you are auditing, but still you can go over there and physically verify the stock. Similarly, when the stock is lying in your factory and it pertains to someone else, then you need to call up that person and ask whether that product is belonging to him or not, or is that product belonging to the company, because you need to be sure. Company can lie to you about anything. Company can enter into a fraudulent transaction about anything and everything, you as an auditor has to be vigile. Logic, guys, simple logic. There is no rocket science in it. There is no law in it. It's simple logic. If someone else has its products inside my factory, then I should call that someone else and confirm whether the product is his or not. Again, I would also check the documents. I will call documents from him and I will check whether that inventory is his or not through documents also. I will call for the documents also. So any kind of inventory which is lying at some other place or someone else's inventory lying at our place is to be audited by us properly. Okay, sir. So this was audit of inventory. Now comes a very, very important element of our audit, and this element is audit of fixed assets and property. Chahat, auditor has to check all these things in a single financial year, that too with the accuracy, and there are ways. So auditor has multiple people working with him. It's not one auditor, it's 10 people working at a time. So when 10 people are working at a time, they can allocate their own respective areas and they have to do this. There's no alternative. Okay, sir. So audit of fixed assets, property, plant and equipment. And guys, this is one of the most important areas in terms of quantum, because manufacturing concerns, think about manufacturing concerns, think about Tata Industries Limited, think about Reliance Industries Limited, think about any big Jaguar company manufacturing cars, think about any big manufacturing concern. Their major money is stuck with fixed assets. Their major money is invested in their plant and machinery. And again, fixed assets has two implications in our financial statements. One is that fixed assets are debited to our balance sheet. It impacts our asset side. Second, fixed assets depreciation hits our profit and loss account. So if fixed asset is erroneous, then the depreciation will be erroneous. If the depreciation is erroneous, our profits will go for a toss. So two impacts of fixed assets. One in the balance sheet. Balance sheet asset side will go up or down if you are erroneously recording your assets. Second is the depreciation, which is disclosed in the profit and loss account. Your depreciation will go for a toss. So what are the procedures for assets audit? And guys, there are two words used over here. Can you guys tell me the origin of the second word which is used over here? This word, property, plant and equipment. What is the origin of this word? Property, plant and equipment. I want to know the origin of this word. Where does this word come from? Fixed asset is a word which we have studied. No, AS10 talks about fixed asset. AS10 doesn't talk about property, plant and equipment. Where does this word come from? Property, plant and equipment. PPE is the short form of this word. And probably you are in Inter as of now. Soon as you'll reach the finals, then you'll probably know the answer precisely. But if you can just guess, if anyone can guess, where does this word come from? Property, plant and equipment. Okay, so this word comes from Ind AS, IFRS. Earlier, the traditional word which is used by the Indians, by the Indian accounting standards, was fixed assets, which is AS10. It was fixed assets. But soon as Ind AS came to picture, soon as IFRS came to picture, they changed the name to property, plant and equipment. No logic behind it, no rational behind it, but it's just a terminology change which has happened. Earlier, the terminology was fixed assets. Now the terminology is property, plant and equipment. That is the only change in terminology. Okay, let's see. How would you audit fixed assets? Because fixed assets are the most important elements of, say, a manufacturing concern. Number one, check the supporting documents of acquisition and disposal. Guys, pretty logical. Pretty logical. The first thing which we need to see is that, please, if this asset belongs to you, please show me the supporting documents, because the invoice, the bill should be in the name of the company. Guys, it may so happen that the company, while the audit is being done, they might physically get the assets from the neighboring company. The neighboring company has big plant. So the company might say that, okay, this is our plant. They might befool the auditors. So auditors need supporting documents. The invoice should be in the name of the company. The company should be the legal owner of the fixed assets. That is the first check. So supporting documents of acquisition and disposal, for example, title deeds of ownership of fixed assets is to be seen by the auditor first of all. So for I'll give you an example, guys. When I was a child in our 6th, 7th standard, then guys, we had a friend, and that friend used to come to school, and he used to show us some jazzy stuff. Jazzy stuff means a very expensive watch, a very fancy pencil box, rubber or pencil, or some fancy stuff, and he used to flaunt it in class. And the peculiar feature about him was that he used to bring it for one day, and next day he didn't used to bring it. He used to leave it at home and say that, oh, I use it rarely, I don't bring it daily. So we used to be astonished. Okay, so we used to ask him, is this watch yours? He used to say, yes, this watch is mine, this pencil box is mine. And later on we realized that he had an elder brother, and he used to bring his elder brother's watch, his elder brother's pencil box, his elder brother's stuff to flaunt in class, and we used to believe that it's his assets. However, these assets were his elder brother's assets. So to avoid such situation in the practical life, in the practical business, we need to see the supporting documents. We need to see the invoice where name of the company is given and where the custody of the fixed asset is given to the company. So ownership, title deed, ownership is to be there in the name of the company. Then of course, guys, physical verification of fixed asset is very, very important. You need not just see it on the papers, but the assets should also be physically present in the company. So physical verification of an asset is an exercise that, apart from supporting documents. So you've seen the invoice. You are sitting in the nice AC office of the company, and you are seeing the invoice, and you are saying, okay, this is 2 crores of machine which has been bought by the company. Yes, 2 crores of machinery. After doing this, you should tell the finance manager, okay, take me to this machine and show me this machine. That is very, very important, because guys, documents can be made up. Forged documents can be made up very, very easily. So to avoid this situation where you are not being shown a forged document, you should take that document with you, go to the factory and actually see the machinery worth rupees 2 crores. Their name will be written, name, you should tally the name, you should tally the make, you should tally the date on which it is installed, etc., etc., etc. So you should physically verify the assets also. Just seeing the invoice is not enough. Just seeing the bill and just seeing the company's name in the bill is not enough at all. You need to go over there and physically check the fixed assets also. So first step, check the supporting documents, check the bills, check the invoices. Second step, physically verify the assets in the factory premises. Third, whether proper records are maintained or not. Now, proper record means whether the company has stated that this asset is being capitalized on which date of capitalization is there properly or not, date in which the company has purchased this particular asset and installed it. The supporting documents like invoices, like bills, all those things should be there. Then cash is flown outwards, so there should be a cash credit and entry in the books of account also. Then the fixed asset should appear in the fixed asset register. So that fixed asset register should be made, in which fixed asset should be displayed. So proper records are required to be made, required to be maintained with respect to the fixed assets. That is also an important part. So check whether proper records are maintained or not. Now, I would ask you a simple question before jumping on to my next point, because my next point is depreciation. And to appreciate this point, I need to ask you one question. When should an asset be capitalized? Which is the date on which an asset should be capitalized? And I'm looking for answers, and I'll open the chat box. When should an asset be capitalized? I'm asking about the date of capitalization of fixed asset. When should the asset be capitalized? When it is finally put to use. Okay. Any other answer? Anamika has said put to use. Installation date. Ujjwal, are you trying to say the date of installation, which means date of ready to use? There are two dates, guys. Put to use or ready to use. Which one should be used? Put to use or ready to use? Put to use, ready to use. Put to use, ready to use. Okay, again a mixed lot. When it is ready to use. Okay, so first of all, let me tell you the difference between ready to use and put to use. Ready to use is a situation where the asset is absolutely in a working condition and you just have to press the on button and the asset will work. So I'll give you an example. Guys, AC. I bought an AC. and that AC has been bought and has been kept at my home. Is the AC ready to use? Answer is no, it's not, because unless and until AC is fitted with its installation, with its pipe, with its electrical condition, with its pipe of water, everything is to be installed in a proper manner. The date is installed, that time it is ready to use. That time it is known as ready to use. And guys, the accounting standard tells you that the asset should be capitalized on an earlier date of ready to use or put to use. And obviously the earlier date is mostly ready to use. So whenever the asset is ready to use, even if you have not started using it, you will apply the depreciation, because depreciation is applied under two conditions. One, when the asset is used because of wear and tear, depreciation is allowed. Second is efflux of time. What is efflux of time? Passage of time. So if time is passing by, then also your asset will be depreciated, and depreciation can be applied on that particular asset. So guys, proper depreciation, if you want to check the proper depreciation of an asset, if you check whether depreciation is applied properly or not, then the dates which you need to use is date on which the asset is ready to use versus the date on which the asset is put to use. So you have to verify whether the asset is ready or whether the asset is put to use or not. That is the main concern. Now I'll tell you a practical example, and my practical example where I found this silly mistake. This is not a fraud. Again repeating, this is not a fraud by the company. This is a silly mistake. Okay. So a company, a very famous MNC, had its head office in Delhi, Hoskas. There's an area in Delhi which is known as Hoskas. It had a office in Delhi, which is outskirts of Delhi. Factory head office was in Hoskas, which is the central location of Delhi, and the factory was in Manesar. So guys, in this situation where the head office was in Hoskas and the factory was in Manesar, under this situation, the fixed assets were brought inside the factory and they were kept inside the factory, and the accounting used to happen at Hoskas, the head office. Now, the company finance manager told me that, oh sir, this year we have bought 10 ACs, and those 10 ACs value is 10 multiplied by 50,000, 5 lakh rupees, and we are going to capitalize these 10 ACs, and these 10 ACs are to be capitalized. Their depreciation is to be levied on in the books of accounts. We want the depreciation to be levied in profit and loss account. I said, okay, sir. Sir, you just have to prove me that whether by 31st March, whether these assets were installed or not. And the CFO with full confidence told me, oh yes, they are installed. I told the CFO, sir, please give me a proof. CFO couldn't give me any proof. Why? Because the installation certificate, which was to be taken from an engineer, from a computer engineer, guys, that installation software was dated 1st of May. So naturally, 1st of May was the installation date when the ACs were installed, but CFO was not made aware of this fact that the ACs have been installed later on, 2 months later. So due to work in the factory, the production in charge could not get time to install those ACs. But in the books of accounts, by mistake, the management, the financial manager had installed and capitalized this AC. So this was a mistake which I could find in these books. And because of this mistake, the depreciation was absolutely wrong, which was calculated in the books of accounts. So guys, as an auditor also, you have to not rely on the assertions which are made by the management. You ask them, okay, give me proof of installation. If somebody has installed AC in your factory, then obviously there would be some expense of pipe, there would be some expense of electrical fittings, there would be some expense, some related expense which are so you need proof for everything. So unless and until these proofs are given to you, proper depreciation cannot be computed, proper amount of depreciation cannot be audited by you. Then check whether scrapping, retirement of fixed assets are properly authorized. Now, this is one very important thing, guys. Authorization of even the purchase of assets and the sale of asset is to be given by the board of directors. Guys, in any company, the person who is responsible to purchase or sell the assets is the board of directors, and board of directors are the sole authority to allow purchase of assets as well as sell the assets. So you as an auditor should see that no one in the lower hierarchy of the management are not authorized to sell assets. Assets are to be sold only and only by board of directors. Because guys, if assets were allowed to be sold by the lower level managements also, then lower level management would very easily sell off the assets and keep the money in their own pockets. So authorization is very, very important. The selling and purchase both should be authorized by the proper person in the hierarchy in the management. Check whether the sales proceed of fixed assets are properly accounted. So guys, can you tell me from an income tax perspective, if any fixed assets is being sold, then which head of income is invoked? If any fixed asset is sold, then which head of income is invoked? I just want the head of income from you. Absolutely. Capital gains. Capital gains is invoked if any fixed asset is sold in any organization. And therefore, guys, since income tax has a separate section for it, there are multiple sections. Since income tax has separate sections for accounting for the receipt of the fixed assets, therefore, the sales proceeds of fixed assets should be properly accounted, should be properly disclosed, so that when the income tax officer is preparing your return, then he should know that, okay, this much lakh of rupees is being earned by selling off the fixed assets. Sales proceed of fixed assets should be properly accounted for. That is the main objective or the main thing which you need to do. Now, let us come on to some other aspects of auditing, guys. And these are some specific institutions, some critical institutions which merit some different type of auditing, which merit some peculiar type of things to be looked at because of their peculiar nature. So in the exam, the examiner will ask you, how will you audit an educational institution? So guys, I'll give you a standard fundamental principle of how to answer the questions, whether the question is for auditing an educational institution, whether the question is for auditing a cooperative society, whether it is for auditing a hospital, whether it is for auditing a trust. I'll give you a standard format. I'll give you a standard method to follow, and that way you'll be able to learn all these points very, very easily. I know you face a lot of difficulty in learning all these areas and all these points for each of them. So I'll give you a standard format. So let's start with audit of educational institute. I have a picture of some random educational institute in front of you. And guys, the first and foremost thing while starting off the audit is that, guys, I will check who has given permission for this educational institution to be activated or to be started. Because guys, educational institute cannot be started randomly. I mean, if today I want to start an educational institute, guys, I need permission. I need proper authority. If I'm starting a school, I need an affiliation from CBSE. If I'm starting a college, then I want an affiliation from Universities Grant Commission. So educational institution is not like a normal business. Is not like any service provider which is providing services. It is not like a normal institution. It is a specialized institution. Therefore, the first thing that I will see for this particular audit is that whether they have taken proper permissions, whether there is a charter, whether there is a trust deed which is required to be fulfilled. So the first element of seeing this special kind of entity is the constitution. Guys, first thing that I will see in an education institution is what is its constitution? Under which act is it constituted? Under which section is it permitted to work in the business? So this thing is the first thing that I'll see in audit of an educational institution, that its constitution should be proper. The way it has been made should be proper. The various sections under which it is operating is proper. And for this, I will examine the trust deed. So guys, usually the educational institutions are formed under a trust deed, and I will read through the trust deed to know what are the important elements of the trust deed. Regulations made under the trust deed, because I want to know that whether the educational institution has fulfilled all the legal requirements or not. So regulations which are governed in the educational institution. Then guys, I will also read the minutes of meeting of the managing committee to know what are the decisions which are being taken for the benefit of the business. So I will check the minutes of meetings which are there with the committee, with the managing committee. I will check the governing body's minute of meeting so that I know what are the principal key regulations, the key decisions which are being taken by this particular authority. Then, guys, after checking the constitution, the next two things which I want to check is incomes and expenditures. So these are the standard two things which every auditor checks: incomes and the expenditures. So let's see. So first of all, you tell me, before even starting the incomes, you tell me what kind of income can you expect from an educational institute? Of course, I've given you the first one. So don't repeat the first one. I've already given you the first one. So don't repeat the first one. Don't repeat student fees. Tell me some other income which an educational institute can earn apart from student fees. Yes, donation. Yes, transport fees. Tuition fees is included in students' fees. Donation. And guys, hostel fees. Hostel fees can be earned by the institution. Examination fees. Canteen fees. Absolutely. Study material fees. Absolutely. So guys, you just need to apply logic to these questions. And logically, you have to tell me that what are the income streams of this particular organization and what are the expenditure schemes of this particular organization. Grants, absolutely, Debian. Grant is also, sports fees can be a part of it. Now, tell me something. I want to audit the students' fees. Let's talk about students' fees first. I want to audit the students' fees. Suppose the management is telling me that, okay, we have received a student fees of 5 crore rupees in the current year. 5 crore rupees is the student's fees. How will I audit 5 crore rupees? Guys, simple. Number of students multiplied by fees paid by each student. Number of students multiplied by fees paid by each students. So I need to check how many students were studying in the organization in that year. And I need to check how much fees has been recovered from a particular student. I will multiply these two numbers and I will audit the student's fees. Simple as that. So let's see. Check the names entered in the student fee register for each month or term with the amount of fees charged. So first thing is that student's fee register would have certain names. Just check that name and just see what is the fee or what is the amount which has been charged from this particular student. So student fee register would have the fee amount. Just see what is the fee amount per person and just see how many students are appearing in this term. Then check fees by comparing the counter file or of receipts. So naturally, guys, we need to see while the fees is being received from the students, there is a fee register, the fee receipt which is given to the students. The smaller part of the fee receipt is kept with the accountant. The larger part of the receipt is given to the students. So guys, I will tally that fee is counterfoils of receipts. So guys, I'll tell you a very simple example. I'll give an example to you. There is something called ghost students. What are ghost students? Ghost students are the students who are not existent, not in existence. They are not there in the school, but still the fees is being received from them. Sir, how does this happen? I'll tell you how does this happen. Okay. So simple as that. Suppose the institute has got some fees in black from some malicious party, from some for doing some fraudulent activity. The school has received some fees from a third party and they want to make this income of black as white. What they'll show it as in their books of accounts is that they will show that they have 10, suppose they had 10,000 students in there. Okay, so 10,000 is too exaggerated a number. 1,000 students were there in the school for the entire year. Guys, the school will tell the authorities that we had 2,000 students and they will account for that black money as the fee for the balance 1,000 students. This is how a fraud can happen in an educational institution. So guys, to curb this policy of ghost students, we check the register of students and we tally it with the receipts which are given by the students, because receipt contains the address, name, mobile number of the student. Guys, as an auditor, you can also do one more thing. On a random basis, you can pick up that mobile number of one of the students and call him and ask him whether he was a student of this particular school or not. Ghost students can be figured out from this particular technique. Similarly, there's a concept of ghost employees. Sometimes to claim extra expenditure of salary, some companies say that, oh, we have 100 employees. But guys, in reality, they have only 80 employees. They don't have 20 employees. These are known as ghost employees. To curb the probability of having ghost employees, what do auditors do? Auditors send an email on the email account of that particular employee and ask for a revert from that particular employee. This is how we prove that ghost employee is not there. Similarly, you have to prove that ghost students are not there. So you need to see the counterfoils of the receipts, which will contain the name, address, mobile number of the particular students. Those counterfoil should be cross-checked with the cash register, should be cross-checked with the books of accounts, should be cross-checked with the fee register which is given to you. That is how you will curb this probability of having ghost students. Next, ascertain that fees paid in advance have been carried forward. So there can be situation where the fee is paid in advance. Someone has paid the fees for the entire year. However, he was only required to pay the fees for a month, but he is required to pay the fees for the entire year. So if someone has paid the fees in advance, the same should be carried forward in the subsequent period, and the arrears that are irrecoverable. So if there are any arrears, which means someone has not been able to pay his fees, then those arrears should be written off. But again, the arrears should be written off after obtaining a sanction. After obtaining a sanction. Sir, why is a sanction required for writing off the arrears? A very, very critical point from an auditor standpoint. Guys, sometimes what accountants do is accountants keep the student's fees which is received from a student in their own pocket. They take it away in their home and they tell the management that, oh, management, this student was unable to pay. Please write off the balance. This student will not pay. To curb this situation, so that there is no fraud in the educational institution, a sanction is required to be taken from the appropriate authority. The management should be made aware about the write-off. Only then a write-off can happen. A write-off should not, the accountant should not be authorized to do the write-off of fees. So that proper check, proper balance can be put whether the accountant or the AFN of the money. They take the money. This is how the areas are to be accounted for. Then check admission fees with admission slip. Whatever admission has taken place, we should check the admission slips that if the management is saying that 20 students have taken admission this year, then admission slips should have amount of the admission fees which the students have given. They should have amount of they should have the names, addresses, signature, mobile phones of the students who have taken the admission and all these things. So admission slips should be checked for the admission fees to ascertain whether admission fees has been correctly recognized in the books or not. Then see the free studentship or scholarship or concessions. If any scholarship has been received by the student, if any concessions have been given to the student, then guys, those concessions should be granted by the person authorized to do so. So it should not so happen that every person is giving concessions to the students. Every accountant cannot give concession to the students. Concession is to be given by any authorized person, which can be a vice principal level of a person or HOD level of a person. So you should see if the accountant is telling you that, okay, we had waived off 50% of the fees of the student, then there should be an authority. There should be a signature of vice principal or the principal that yes, really this student's fees was waived off. So authority should be given to the auditor. Other receipts, there can be some other receipts. As I told you, there can be hostel fees. There can be caution money which is received, which is the security deposit which is received by every student. Rental income, maybe the school has given its premises after school hours is given to some coaching institute to take coaching over there. So there can be some rental income. There can be fine for late payment. So many students pay the fees late. So there can be some fines, there can be donations which are given to the school. So all these other incomes can also be there. So naturally guys, first of all, we'll check the deposit receipt, because for every income we will issue a receipt to the person who is giving us the income. So first we will check the donation receipt. Then we will check that the amount has been properly recorded. So recording of the amount should be an important element, that it is recorded in the books of accounts properly, because it should not so happen that donation has been received and in the books of accounts it is written that student fee is received. This should not happen. It should not happen that hostel fees is received, but the entry which is made in income statement is that student fees is received. This should not happen. So recording has to be proper, which means classification of this income should be proper in the books of accounts along with the P&L account and the balance sheet, etc. Then vouch that donations have been used for the purpose for which they have been received. So guys, donation have a very peculiar feature that guys, donation, if it is received for a particular use, then they have to be expended for that use only, which means if the donation is received for, say, student fees, then the donation should actually be used for student benefit only, to waive off some economically backward students. If the donation is received for building fund, then that donation should be utilized in building, making building only. So you need to check whether the purpose for which the donation is received, the money is employed in that purpose only. So this is an important point of verifying the donations. Then guys, expenditure. Of course, expenditure is the most critical part of any P&L account, because by waivering the expenditure, we can waiver the profit and loss account of a particular organization. So expenditure is the most important element of any organization. So expenditure, we can vouch the expenses. Vouch means verify. Guys, vouch word is not a very technical word. Vouch means verify. Verify means you have to see the documents. You have to see the bill. You have to see the invoice. So that is vouching. So you can vouch the expense, inquire into unduly heavy expenditure under any head. If there is unreasonably high expenditure under any head, then you have to check why is that particular expenditure so high. So vouching is the first phase of any audit of expenditure. Vouching means you have to check the documents, whether bill is there or not, because bill is the main consideration for doing an expenditure. So bill should be there. Ascertain that system of ordering, inspection on receipt, issue of provision, food stuff, clothing or other equipment is efficient and all bills are duly authorized. So guys, whatever provisions are bought in the school, like food, like clothing is bought in the school, books are bought in the school, all those books, all those provisions, all those food stuff should have proper authority first of all. Then they should have proper supporting bills. Someone should have authorized purchase of those inventories, and then there should be some proper invoice of that particular expenditure. So you need to see for all these things that there are two things. One is authorization, second is proper supporting documents, proper bills and vouchers should be there for all the expenditure. And see that increase in salaries of the staff have been sanctioned by the committee. So if there is any increase in salary, that increase in salary should be sanctioned by the committee members, by the members of the educational institute. Verify that provident fund money of the staff has been invested in appropriate security. Provident fund should be what is provident fund? First of all, what do you mean by provident fund? If you can just tell me through the chat box, what is provident fund? Okay, sanction. Shivangi, I will explain sanction in detail surely. Provident fund, retirement benefit. Okay. Employer-employee contribution. Perfect. So provident fund is the employer contribution and employee contribution into a fund which is used for the benefit of the employees. So guys, you again need to check that provident fund expenditure is being properly recorded by the management of the institution and the educational institution, and that is appropriately being invested in the security wherever it should be invested. So that is a consideration. Then last, capital expenditure. Guys, capital expenditure, if a building is being purchased or a big equipment is being purchased, then three things need to be checked. First is a sanction. Senior person, some managing director should be able to sanction the purchase fixed assets. Second is voucher, the bill which is related to purchase of this fixed asset, that voucher should be there. And third is that you have to physically verify the asset. You don't just have to see the vouchers, you have to go over there and physically verify the asset also. And all these assets are assets for any organization are to be verified in three forms. First is sanction, which means authority. Second is voucher, and third is physical verification of that particular fixed asset. So guys, these are the basic points which you need to remember for all the organizations and for all auditing all the elements of these particular type of values.